Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, everybody. Welcome to Ghost Boy's Top 10 Best Christmas Horror Movies, Volume 7. It's been a very busy past few months. It seems like every year around the holidays I get sick, and so I'm always trying really hard to get my Christmas videos finished before the end of December. So hopefully I didn't get done too late and this video is still relevant. This is part of an annual video series I do every year, so if you haven't seen parts 1 through 7, I recommend checking those videos out. Every one of the movies I'm discussing today either takes place on or around Christmas time. And as always on my channel, I like having a wide variety of different horror subgenres, including supernatural, psychological, slashers, found footage, anthology, creature features, and paranormal hauntings. None of these movies are in any type of order, but number 1 is definitely one of my new favorite Christmas slasher films of all time. Now with all that being said, let's begin our list. Adult Swim Yule Log. What starts as a simple Yule log video devolves into an unbelievable nightmare when a couple and a group of podcasters spend the night in a double-booked cabin that is secretly occupied by evil and murderous forces. So if you've been living under a rock and don't already know this, there's these popular fireplace videos online, and it's basically just a recording of a fire burning, and people who don't actually have fireplaces in their home watch them every year around the holidays. And the whole concept of this film is that it starts as a normal, ordinary fireplace video, but along the way becomes a horror movie. And I heard that concept and thought it sounded awesome. I imagined this would be some type of found footage film, but I wasn't exactly sure what subgenre this movie was, and since there's not really a trailer for it, I watched a few reviews of the film on YouTube. But I got so annoyed because not one person on YouTube would say almost anything about this film. Pretty much everyone said the exact same thing. They just say, "Watch the movie for yourself and find out. Go into it not knowing anything at all." And to be completely honest, that really pissed me off. Because yes, I do like being surprised by movies sometimes, but you can't expect everyone to just spend an hour and a half of their time watching something when they have no idea what it's about. So I will be discussing this movie and telling you what it's about, since apparently nobody else on YouTube will. But let me start by saying this is the craziest, most weird, strange, insane movie that I have ever seen. And I promise you I'm not exaggerating. I mean that very seriously and literally, and I'll explain why. So yes, this movie starts as a normal fireplace video being filmed in some type of bed and breakfast cabin. But then the cabin gets broken into by some murderous hillbillies, and they kill the maid and hide inside the cabin without the couple staying there knowing. And so I immediately thought, okay, this is gonna be some type of serial killer home invasion movie. But boy was I wrong, because this film isn't just one subgenre, or maybe two. It's like every single subgenre of horror to ever exist ever. And every time you think it can't get any crazier, it does. This movie features cults, serial killers, aliens, time travel, alternate realities, and possibly even a supernaturally possessed flying Yule log. And at first, I thought it was just way too ridiculous. But like I said, it just kept getting crazier and crazier. And at a certain point, I just started laughing, because I couldn't believe what was happening. And I think that's when I realized I shouldn't take the film so seriously, and I should just have fun with it. But that's not to say this film is just dumb fun and devoid of meaning, because there's actually some pretty dark plot points about the history of the area involving slavery, and it turns out that the Yule log is actually cursed because it was cut from a tree that was used to hang slaves back in the day. So this film definitely features some pretty dark subject matter. And the other two things that surprised me about this movie is occasionally it has some pretty brutal and badass kills. And secondly, I really enjoyed almost all of the characters. At first, it's just a couple trying to have a romantic weekend together, But then a group of podcasters show up because somehow the cabin got double booked. So now both groups of people are forced to stay there together. And I really enjoyed the chemistry from everyone and thought it leads to some pretty hilarious moments as well. I was going to discuss this movie last year, but to be completely honest, it's really not Christmassy at all, besides the Yule log. But I am discussing the sequel today, which is very Christmassy. And I figured I couldn't talk about the second film without covering the first one beforehand. So let me just wrap this up by saying Adult Swim Yule Log is the most wild, trippy, funny, bizarre, dark, batshit crazy movie I've ever seen. And you really just gotta see it for yourself to believe it. So when Christmas time rolls around, pour yourself a big glass of eggnog, then sit back and relax and watch Adult Swim Yule Log. Adult Swim Yule Log 2, Branching Out. Traumatized and living in fear, Zoe attempts to put the horrors of the past behind her by going on a Christmas vacation with her best friend. But they end up getting stranded in a small Christmassy town, where things might not be as perfect as they appear to be. Alright, so first thing I'll say about this movie is that it's drastically different from the first film, and I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. The first movie is the most batshit, crazy film I've ever seen in my life, but the sequel is more of a straight-up horror comedy. It's still really good and really weird, just nowhere close to how insane the first movie was. And some people will love that switch up, and some people will hate it. But with all that being said, I still really enjoyed this sequel, and even watched it 2 times. The first movie was like every single subgenre mashed together into one film. But this movie is literally a Hallmark Christmas movie mixed with a horror comedy. And that's not just me saying that. One of the characters in the movie literally says that same thing. The best friend of our final girl tells her she's basically been living in a horror movie since the events of the first film. And since it's Christmas time, she should instead be living in a Hallmark film. And they actually do something really cool and creative in this movie, where the film goes back and forth between colorful and full screen when everything is happy and Christmassy, and then when bad things start happening, it goes to widescreen and the colors fade to a darker, more ominous shade. This movie is also very funny, because for a decent amount of time, this film really is just a Hallmark Christmas parody film, and if you've ever seen any Hallmark Christmas movie ever, then you know they're full of cliches, and almost every single film is exactly the same. And this movie makes fun of every single one of those cliches and stereotypes, and it made me laugh ridiculously hard. But don't worry, horror fans, there's also a pretty gnarly town massacre scene towards the ending of the film. And once again, just like the first movie, it has great gore. This film is also 100 times more Christmassy than the first one. We get Christmas festivities, Christmas stores, Christmas family dinners, Christmas music, Christmas outfits, and of course, it wouldn't be Christmas without the return of our favorite cursed Yule log. Also, 2 more things I wanted to mention before I forget. I loved seeing some of the characters from the first movie return, but I also loved Zoe's new best friend, Jakester. I thought he was probably the most hilarious part of the film, and he was just absolutely adorable. I'm very grateful to Adult Swim for giving us some LGBTQ representation. And lastly, the ending of this movie is what really blew me away and made me love this film. I really hope we get a 3rd movie to make this a full trilogy, because that ending literally had my jaw on the floor in the most excited way possible. So if you enjoyed the first film, then I have no doubt that you will love Adult Swim Yule Log 2, Branching Out. The Lost Footage of Leah Sullivan. A young journalism student decides to return to her hometown to investigate a brutal murder that took place 30 years ago. So this is a found footage film, and it's the typical Blair Witch Project type of story, featuring a girl who sets out to make a documentary about an urban legend, or in this case, an unsolved murder. She interviews people in town, and even makes friends with the local police deputy. And together, they try solving the 30-year-old mystery, and some creepy stuff happens along the way. This movie isn't extremely Christmassy, but it does have a decent amount of cozy houses decorated with Christmas lights and stockings. Plus, Christmas music plays in the background a few different times. What I really liked so much about this film in particular is how real and believable it felt. It's done in a very realistic, amateur way, and I hope nobody tries twisting my words because I mean that in the best way possible. Now, let's talk about the scares, because holy shit, this movie scared the hell out of me. I jumped so many times it was ridiculous. It reminded me a lot of the scares in the Hell House LLC franchise, because it's those very subtle scares that usually happen in the background, and if you aren't paying close attention, you might not even notice it at first. But when you do notice, you jump so much that your laptop literally goes flying off your bed. Or at least that's what happened to me. And another comparison to the Blair Witch Project is the last 20 minutes are probably the best and definitely most terrifying part of the film. Also, I can't believe I almost forgot to mention this, but all of the investigating into the murder is very unsettling. The more they uncover, the more intriguing it becomes. And they actually show some of the crime scene photos, and they are very disturbing. So if you're searching for a creepy, Christmassy found footage film where the scares are genuine, then I recommend checking out The Lost Footage of Leah Sullivan. Cold Wind Blowing. When a group of friends take a trip to a remote cabin to get away from their families for Christmas, their stress-free getaway turns into a nightmare. Trapped in a cabin by a supernatural creature, their fight for survival puts their fracturing relationships to the test, and it soon becomes clear that not all of them will be surviving the holidays. So I heard about this movie when it first came out, but I only heard negative things about it, so I never checked it out, despite being very curious. Because when I saw the trailer and I read the plot description, it sounded pretty similar to the holiday horror film Dismembering Christmas. And after finally deciding to say fuck the critics and the bad reviews, I watched Cold Wind Blowing, and I actually really enjoyed it. Also, my initial thoughts were confirmed because this movie is definitely pretty similar to Dismembering Christmas. Both are very low-budget indie films and are about a group of friends spending Christmas together at a cabin in the woods. Except Dismembering Christmas is a slasher film, and Cold Wind Blowing is actually a creature feature. Although I'm not sure if I would describe it that way, because this film could definitely also be considered a drama. There's lots of fighting and arguing between all the characters, which might sound annoying at first, but if I'm being completely honest, I think I was more interested in the drama and the chemistry between the characters at certain points than I was in the supernatural elements. And speaking of the supernatural elements, I don't know if there's any confirmation on this, but I believe the creature in this film is a Wendigo. Which is kind of funny because there's another movie on this list that I'm discussing, and it also takes place around Christmas time and features a Wendigo. But yeah, they never say exactly what the creature is, but it's some type of humanoid monster with antlers that eats human flesh. So I think it's safe to assume it's a Wendigo. There's even a shadow of the creature on the poster. I saw a lot of reviews shitting on the design of the creature, so I was expecting it to look completely awful and ridiculous. But when the creature was revealed, I really didn't think it looked half bad. Sadly, people are just way too critical and judgmental about low-budget indie films. But this movie had some surprisingly really good actors, and when the characters got emotional and scared, I thought they did a genuinely great job. It's also worth mentioning this film does have a little bit of LGBTQ representation, which I really appreciate and thought was very cute. And of course, I gotta talk about one of my favorite aspects of this movie. And if you've seen any of my videos before, you already know what I'm gonna say, because I say it about almost every single Christmas and winter horror movie ever. And that is, I love the setting and location. I love movies where the characters are isolated in a location, and I love movies with cabin in the woods, and this movie is no exception. It snows almost non-stop throughout this whole film, so there's lots of beautiful shots of the snow falling and the cold wind blowing. and the inside of the cabin is very cozy and covered in Christmas decorations. The characters even decorate a tree and build snowmen together. Now, before I give you my final thoughts, here's a little movie trivia for you. This film is named after the song featuring the same title, which is performed by David Lynch. It actually plays at the end of this movie, which I thought was very beautiful and poetic. It's also worth mentioning that Larry Fessenden is in this movie, who of course is known for his involvement in such films as You're Next, We Are Still Here, and ironically, the 2001 film Wendigo, which I still haven't seen, but I will be checking it out after the holidays. But overall, Cold Wind Blowing is a realistic, drama-filled creature feature, with a hint of a home invasion film. There's lots of snowy Christmas atmosphere and intense, suspenseful moments. So this holiday season, if you're stuck at home because it won't stop snowing, then I recommend watching Cold Wind Blowing. Terrifier 3. Art the Clown prepares to unleash bloody violence and chaos on the unsuspecting residents of Miles County as they peacefully drift off to sleep on Christmas Eve. So yes, I actually talked about this movie just last year and even made it number 1 in my top 10 best Christmas horror movies list, volume 5. But I had only seen it once last year when I reviewed it, and I actually enjoyed this movie much more the second time around. And so I wanted to talk about it again, especially because in my review I mainly talked about Art the Clown himself as a character, rather than actually discussing the film. So what I noticed upon my second viewing is how much this film got me into the Christmas spirit. I watched it around Halloween time when I watched the other Terrifier films, but even though it was October, I remember getting so excited for Christmas. And I think that's one reason why, even though this movie is only 1 year old, it has already become a Christmas horror classic for a lot of people, and deserves to be added to your annual Christmas watch list. We all love Santa slasher films, but what's even better is a killer clown Santa slasher film. And with that being said, this film has some of the grossest, most gruesome gore and violent kills I've ever seen. But amongst all the puddles of blood and guts, there's also family reunions, Christmas shopping, cookie baking, beautiful snowy nights, and multiple Santa Clauses, both naughty and nice. Plus, Sienna and Jonathan are both very likable characters, and Sienna in particular is one of the best final girls ever, and her story in this film is very engaging and heartfelt. So this Christmas season, if you're searching for a gory Santa slasher to put you in the Christmas spirit, then I guarantee that you will love watching Terrifier 3. Nightmare on 34th Street. A young boy receives a visit from a mysterious Santa Claus who entertains him with 4 chilling tales of holiday horror. So Nightmare on 34th Street is a Christmas-themed horror anthology film. And if you couldn't already tell by the title of the movie, it's kind of a combination of Miracle on 34th Street and Nightmare on Elm Street. But this movie really doesn't have anything to do with those two films, it's just a cool title. But anyways, this anthology film features 4 different stories and 1 wraparound story. And as usual, when I talk about anthology films, I like discussing a little bit of each story. The first story is called The 3 Christmas Nutters, and it's basically a home invasion story about a psycho Santa, an evil elf, and a sinister snowman who terrorizes a family on Christmas Eve. This story is short, sweet, and simple. I liked the concept, and I thought it was executed well. The second story is called The Ventriloquist Who Stole Christmas. And this one is about a struggling ventriloquist trying to find work around the holidays. But he constantly gets bullied by everyone, except for his puppet, Mr. White, who encourages him to follow his dream. The cool thing about this story is we really don't know if the puppet is alive or if the guy is just crazy and hearing voices. I thought this story was unique and interesting. It also had a cool backstory featuring the ventriloquist's father. The third story is titled Merry Krampus, and it's about a recently divorced mother struggling to make Christmas special for her children. And things get even worse when they get visited by Krampus. I really enjoyed this one. Krampus was surprisingly really funny, and the story has a pretty dark twist ending. This is definitely one of the best tales in the film. And the fourth and final story is called The 12 Kills of Christmas. This one is about a corrupt and possibly murderous priest trying to cover up his sins of the past. I'm not gonna lie, I had a hard time understanding everything that happened in this story because it definitely had a lot going on, but that's not to say it was bad. I still enjoyed it and really liked the concept. And the ending of the wraparound story reveals who the Santa Claus telling all these stories actually is. And it's probably my favorite part of the whole movie. I really liked how everything tied together in the end. The actor who plays Santa Claus is awesome, and somehow manages to be both hilarious and also very sinister and intimidating. This movie really made me laugh. I did not expect it to be so funny, but it still balances the horror with the comedy very well. This movie definitely takes chances, and isn't just the same stories we've seen recycled over and over again. It's a very unique film, and I applaud it for its originality. So if you're looking for a new holiday horror anthology to watch this Christmas, then pour yourself some milk and grab some cookies to eat, then sit back and watch Nightmare on 34th Street. Snow Falls. A holiday party quickly turns serious when a brutal winter storm strands 5 friends at a remote cabin. Convinced that the snowflakes have infected them with a fatal virus, they struggle to stay awake to avoid freezing to death, and slowly begin losing their minds. So I've seen a lot of negative reviews for this movie, but I don't think it deserves the hate that it gets. I think this is a very intelligently well-made movie, and people don't give it the credit it deserves. It's kind of a mixture of multiple different horror subgenres. Psychological, survivalist, and a bit of supernatural. A group of friends are partying and having a great holiday weekend together, until a giant snowstorm knocks out the power and they become stranded. But what makes this really interesting is that before that happens, they used the snow to make margarita snow cones. And now everyone is feeling very strange and sick, and convinced themselves that the snow is poisoned, and they consumed some type of deadly virus. Not all of them believe that though, however, the group of friends do start experiencing mass hysteria, and basically start losing their minds and hallucinating as well. Although it's never really explained if everything happening really is just mass hysteria, or if they were poisoned by the snow. Either way, a lot of spooky shit kept happening, and this is definitely a fun movie to theorize about and see what other people believed was happening. And the supernatural hallucinations are pretty cool and creepy in my opinion. There's one with a snowman that they built earlier in the movie, and I thought it was pretty memorable. Also, the main girl, Enid, is a very intelligent, likable, layered character. And her backstory kinda added a whole nother mysterious, intriguing element to the story, which I really enjoyed. I try to watch this movie once every year, and the ending gives me chills every time. Overall, this film is visually stunning. The deep snow, the remote cabin, and the icy blue hues perfectly capture the harshness of the winter weather. And the cinematography effectively creates a claustrophobic and chilling environment that truly puts you in the shoes of the stranded characters. This is a great film for a chilly night indoors. If you want an engaging, supernatural, psychological, survivalist holiday horror film to watch while it's snowing outside, then this is a cozy, atmospheric pick that satisfies that specific craving for a wintry scare. So this December, when you get finished decking the halls, then bundle up on the couch and watch Snow Falls. Night Train. On Christmas Eve, 2 passengers and the conductor of the night train discover that someone has died in their cabin. They come across valuable diamonds on his person and decide to cover up his death and keep the diamonds for themselves. But they soon find out the hard way that all greed comes with a price. So this movie is basically like Polar Express mixed with Murder on the Orient Express. because it takes place entirely on a train during a blizzard on Christmas Eve, but also has a murder mystery element to it. And this film stars the very talented Danny Glover, who I know and love from Saw. And additionally, one of the other side characters is played by Richard O'Brien, who wrote my all-time favorite musical, The Rocky Horror Picture Show, as well as starring in it as Riff Raff. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't expect much from this film. The trailer didn't make it look great, and it's a pretty cliche story, or at least that's what the description will have you believe. But I was very impressed and straight up shocked by this film. It's extremely intense and suspenseful, and I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. Not everything is what it appears to be, and there's lots of twists and turns. Plus, I really loved the setting of the night train. It's very cute and cozy, and covered in holiday decorations and Christmas lights. It even has a cute little Christmas tree. But there's also a dark, dreadful presence aboard the train, which is only further displayed by the brutal, bitter blizzard raging outside. I know I'm not really saying much about the actual story, but it's a pretty simple premise, and it's hard to discuss the film without spoiling anything. But I did enjoy the chemistry between the three main characters, and I thought they were all very entertaining and intriguing. All the actors did a great job as well, and the mystery element kept me engaged the whole time. So when Christmas time rolls around once again, grab yourself a bowl full of candy canes and watch The Night Train. Silent Bite. A gang of bank robbers take shelter in a motel after a Christmas Eve bank heist. But unbeknownst to them, they are not the most dangerous thing seeking refuge on this cold December night. Alrighty, so judging by the description of this movie, I thought it was going to be kinda like Die Hard, but we actually don't see the bank heist go down, besides in the opening credit sequence, which I thought was very clever and well done. This movie does have some small similarities to Die Hard, but it's more about the aftermath of the bank heist, because the group of bank robbers are laying low in a motel until the coast is clear for them to flee the area. But unfortunately for them, a group of seductive, bloodthirsty vampires are also taking shelter inside the motel. And I think everyone knows by now that I've been obsessed with hotels and motels ever since I was a little kid. There's just something about them that I find to be interesting, but also very eerie at the same time. So of course I loved the setting and location of this film, because not only is the motel eerie, but it's also very cozy at the same time, because the whole place is covered with Christmas decorations, inside and out. And something I really didn't expect about this movie is how much I enjoyed the characters, but everyone was very likable and surprisingly funny. Also, something really awesome about this movie is one of the main characters, who is also the leader of the gang of bank robbers, is played by Simon Phillips, which is ironic because that same actor played Santa Claus in Once Upon a Time at Christmas, and also the sequel, The Nights Before Christmas. And in this movie, all of the characters have code names, and his is literally Father Christmas. And one of the other main characters, who is the mother of all the vampires, is played by Sarah D. Geode, who just so happens to play Mrs. Claus in Once Upon a Time at Christmas and The Nights Before Christmas, which I thought was pretty badass. I loved both of those movies, and they actually planned on making a third film to make it a full trilogy, but sadly that never happened. So I was very thrilled and pleasantly surprised to see both of them together again in another holiday horror movie, and they absolutely killed their roles, no pun intended. And now, let's talk about the vampires. You know, if I had a nickel for every Christmas vampire horror movie I've seen, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened more than once. For real though, I thought the vampires looked pretty sick. I was worried they were gonna look silly and cheesy, but I was surprised by how good the special effects looked. Some of the vampires are scary, some of them are seductive, and some of them are a bit of both. But the combination of the supernatural vampire elements mixed with the action thriller heist aspect just blended together perfectly, and made for a very unique, badass movie. And then you throw in the Christmas factor, and overall, you just got one incredibly memorable, fun, festive, thrilling film. So this December, if you're seeking something merry and extraordinary to watch on a cold winter's night, then I recommend watching Silent Bite. Cold Meat. A driver rescues a waitress from her abusive ex and continues driving until he crashes during a snowstorm. Injured and trapped in a ravine, he fights for survival, but it soon becomes clear that the cold is not the only danger. Okay, so this is going to be a really hard movie to talk about without spoiling anything, but I am going to discuss one thing that's kind of a spoiler, I guess, but since it's literally on the poster, I think it's safe to talk about. It would be hard for me to say what type of subgenre this movie is exactly, but if I had to guess, I'd say it's a mixture of survivalist horror with some creature feature elements as well. But more than anything, I think this is a character study. This movie is also very eerily similar to another snowy Christmas movie I love, that one being Wind Chill. And similar to that film, most of the Christmas vibes in this movie come from the music playing on the radio. But there's also other things like Christmas trees as well. Alright, so the small spoiler in this movie that I'm going to be discussing is the deer-like creature on the poster, which is actually a Wendigo, which just so happens to be my favorite type of monster or creature. And I can confidently say, as of right now at least, I've never seen a bad horror movie featuring a Wendigo, and that includes this movie. But I should let everyone know the Wendigo isn't a very large part of this movie. It's more of a ever-lurking threat in the background. But more than that, I think it's supposed to be symbolic or metaphorical to something happening to one of the main characters. And besides that, I really don't know what else to say about this movie without spoiling the entire film. It feels weird discussing this movie because there's a huge element of the story that I'm just completely ignoring, but it's one of those great reveals in horror that you just gotta experience for yourself, so I won't spoil it. But I will say what really makes this movie as great as it is the characters and the interactions between them. All the actors did a fantastic job. This movie gets pretty dark and emotional towards the end, and the actors really gave great performances. There's also the whole other element of the non-stop blizzard itself, which is pretty breathtakingly brutal, but also beautiful at the same time. This is definitely one of those movies that do such a great job at making the characters look miserable and freezing that you yourself start feeling cold while watching the film. So definitely grab an extra blanket and turn up the heat, then put on a cozy sweater and watch Cold Meat. And now, the number one movie on my list, and one of my new favorite Christmas slasher films of all time is The Naughty List of Mr. Scrooge. 10 years after a tragedy during a production of A Christmas Carol, former college friends reunite to spend the holidays together. But while reconnecting at a winter cottage, they become stalked and hunted by someone dressed as a terrifying version of Ebenezer Scrooge. This is the classic slasher film story about a group of friends all connected by a sinister secret from the past that comes back to haunt them while gathering together to celebrate the holidays. But even though it has a cliché premise, that didn't stop me from absolutely loving this movie. I've always been a big fan of A Christmas Carol, and I'm not gonna lie, I really liked the design of the killer in this movie. The Ebenezer Scrooge costume is pretty creepy and unsettling. Unfortunately, one downside of this film is that the kills aren't very great. We don't see most of them, or we just see the aftermath. But there were at least 2 different kills that stood out and I really enjoyed. They also did a great job with the mysterious identity of the killer. As Randy from Scream would say, everyone is a suspect, and the film really keeps you guessing until the last minute as to who the killer could be. And one of my favorite aspects of this film is the setting and location. The cottage honestly reminded me of a gingerbread house. It just has that look and feel of a cozy bed and breakfast or a fairy tale type of home. There's also secret passageways throughout the whole house, which just adds more to the whole eerie vibes of the situation. And speaking of secret passageways, this film honestly reminded me a lot of Clue. Murder mysteries, everyone's a suspect and trapped together in this big, eerie manner. And of course, this movie is very Christmassy, featuring a very catchy soundtrack, festive clothing, and lights, wreaths, and Christmas trees as far as the eye can see. So this holiday season, if you want a fun murder mystery slasher to put you in the Christmas mood, then I highly recommend watching The Naughty List of Mr. Scrooge. Well, everybody, that's the end of my list. If you don't like it, you can suck Santa's dick. Merry Christmas, bitches. I hope you get all your Christmas wishes. And I hope these movies fill you with festive fear. So have a merry, scary Christmas and a happy new year.
Christmas.